Oh, we are live.
Moana, everybody. Welcome to the ordinary meeting of the Infrastructure Committee via Zoom. Today's date being the 4th of August 2022. We'll begin with karakia. The karakia I'll do is one that I've used before, and it's just sort of reflective of some of the values that we should bring to at the table as we debate about showing respect for one another and making sort of wise decisions. So I'll begin. Kia horo te muna te maurino, kia whakapapa panamo te mauna, hei huira matarato ito rangi nei, atu mai, tata I tato katoa. Okay, housekeeping. Warm welcome to Naomi Aporo, our iwi rep, also to our youth councillor. We're there, Stella. Welcome, and also to councillors and to the officers. Normal Zoom and protocols, live stream protocols apply. We really appreciate if you keep your cameras on but your mics off. Hands up for questions. We'll use the green tick, red cross for the votes. Try and take some live stream. I know these can be quite arduous, so we'll look probably a break around about 10ish, another one around about 11, but hopefully we might even be done by then. Okay, if you need to step away or have to step away from, just send a chat to the governance advisors. Just let them know that you're stepping away from the meeting, and cameras, camera off and mute when we're away as well. Okay, we'll move on to apologies. I have apologies from Councillor Edgar and Councillor Rainey and the Mayor for lateness. Do I have any other apologies?
Brian, I've got one from Councillor Sanson, an apology for lateness.
Oh, rightio. So apologies. So 2 apologies for absence, Councillor Rainey and Councillor Edgar. 2 apologies for lateness, Councillor Sanson and Councillor and Her Worship the Mayor. So I'm happy to move the apology.
Can I'm actually on the call.
Rachel's here.
I did send a message to Matt.
Yeah, okay. Oh, we'll move the
I'm
apologies.
happy to second, Mr. Chair.
Okay, so we've got 2 apologies for absence and apology for lateness, moved by me, seconded by Councillor Courtney. Just a green tick, please. Great, it is carried. Confirmation of order of business. As per the agenda, we've got one matter in public forum. We have 2 public forum speakers this morning. We'll do there'll be no chairs report, parking policy, parking strategy. Then we'll have to go into public excluded. But as per the agenda, any notice of any variations or any changes anyone's aware of? That's been done. Okay, any interests to be declared at the appropriate time? Just a reminder that the interest register is there. Okay, public forum. First one, who have you?
Through the chair, they're both available now. So Jane was scheduled first and is just joining now.
Okay, first one is Jane Murray from Public Health. Moana, Jane, lovely to see you again.
Good morning. Thank you very much for your time today.
Rightio. We are in your hands because you're representing, was it Public Health?
I'm representing Nelson Marlborough Public Health Service Te Whatu Ora.
Rightio.
It's a new name.
I know there's been a change of recent times, but
yes. So we're just here to commend the council on its active transport strategy. Walking and cycling have a wide range of positive benefits for individuals, including improved mental health, physical health, affordability, increased independence for children, along with greater social connectedness, crime prevention through more eyes on the street and environmental benefits. And we strongly support the principles because there's a clear commitment to a range of active transport options for the community, not just for commuters, but for a range of different community members. And we support NCC's intention to focus on schools as a priority because it will set up travel habits for life. And we support the school and workplace travel planning. And it's fantastic to see further investment in improving safety for all road users. I'd like to also congratulate you on the use of targets where there are no active transport users are killed or seriously injured. Given the desired investment in active transport and its corresponding health benefits, we do recommend that the targets are strengthened where there is to be a trebling of journeys to work or school by cycling and walking. And also our other recommendation is concerning cycling infrastructure. We know that the minimum parking requirements have been taken out of the district plan rules now, but we'd like to actually see minimum cycling parking requirements added into this strategy and also the district plan review. And that is my short summary this morning.
Right. Oh, thanks, Jane. Happy to take any questions or clarification from. I don't see any hands up.
I think Councillor Bowater.
Oh, right. Okay. Sorry. Councillor Bowater.
Previously, you've done a report around the impact, noise, etc., around the Waimea Road. Was such a one done around the Tahuna area as well in previous times? I'm just thinking back now with the changes that have coming into your own services. Was any consideration given to that? Because I know that there was around the levels of pollution, etc. There was a lot done around the Waimea Road, and I'm just wondering if Tahuna's had the same level of focus. Thanks, Jane.
That was a health impact assessment that was done, I think, I could get my timing right, 2012-15. It was prior to me working for the Public Health Service, and believe at the time that was a health impact assessment that was agreed upon by Nelson City Council and the Public Health Service. So I think the teams worked with the infrastructure team on that project. If that is something that the council is interested in, we can certainly look at that with our health protection officers to create something, but I would need to have further conversations with the infrastructure team.
Thanks, Jane.
Okay, thanks, Jane. Thanks, Jane. I think you had some very clear submission, very clear what you wanted. So the fact there's no questions, I think emphasises the fact that it was so clear. So thank you very, very much.
Thanks for your time.
Great, thanks. Next public forum is Mr. Barry Thompson. Just wait for him to connect. Just still waiting to connect. Right.
You can talk now.
Good morning, Mr. Thompson. Good morning, Barry. Good to see you again.
Hello, I'm here.
Yep.
Do you need anything else?
Well, I just want to adjust your camera a wee bit so we can sort of see you properly. There we go. Great. Ready to go, Mr. Thompson. Barry, we're ready to go.
I'm ready to go.
Yep.
Right, welcome,
5 minutes.
councillors. You can say here. I'm Barry Thompson. I don't know how many minutes I've got to present, but anyway, I've already over the years given you councillors a lot of hell when in submissions I've made to the council about parking. Now, I've been in public parking for 34 years, and in that stage, I provide 20 parks for our staff and the tenants in our office building. I provide 120 parks in U Street, which is mainly used, they're all used for permanents to occupy them each day, particularly bank people. Half of Trafalgar Street upstairs uses that area of ours, and they've taken the car parks for years. We have a waiting list. We can't provide enough parks. Secondly, some of you people, and Matt Laurie in particular, I'm having a go at here, because he's a greenie by the looks of things, all the reports in the paper, and he hasn't got a bloody clue about parking in town. I don't know I've ever seen him in a car in town.
I think you're being, Mr. Thompson, I think you're being a little bit disrespectful. So can you just tone it down a bit, please?
Oh, well, this is my style, and I don't alter it much. Anyway, he's keen on buses. And if you check with people, a bus only goes from one place to another. And the people coming into Nelson don't want to do that. They want to go from, say, Trafalgar Street down to my office or somewhere else. They don't want to wait round for a bloody bus to come round. The town is not suitable for buses. U Street is used quite a bit by the buses, and it's too narrow, parked all around the place, and it's hopeless. We need permanent car parks in town for office workers and others. Now, Damon Motors, which I'm tied up with, they have over 40 staff, and they do not have more than 2 or 3 car parks in the whole of their premises for staff. Their staff have to go down to the wood and park and annoy all the people who've got houses down in the wood. Your council just don't understand that. Now, Matt Laurie lives up the Vanguard Street way, and you won't realise the number of car parks that are taken by local people here. When I go past the Girls' College each morning, the first 20 parks in Trafalgar Street outside the Girls' College are taken by local workers, not the Girls' College. Bike numbers. I have yet to run over a cyclist in town, and I get around town a lot in my car. I have yet to see more than 2 or 3 cyclists in a month when I'm getting around town. The town is devoid of cyclists, except ones who go along the footpath outside my office. And they do that. They're mainly young kids. There's 1 or 2 ladies who have work in my area, and they come by bikes. But they must live in the middle of the town, because nobody in their right mind over the hill from Bishopdale would ever think of coming in by bike. I'm a great supporter of the link. The link should be done instead of the city library, which after all is suffering from lesser trade. And I really think that your council are devoid of consideration for the motorists. Also, I have a huge number of clients, and I've had them for years, who live, tradesmen, for instance, who live in Richmond or live in Nelson. Now, when a Nelson tradesman is asked to go out to Richmond to do a job, he has a hell of a job to do that, because he strikes all the traffic problems that go between here and Richmond. I have a lot of property that I look after and also own in Richmond. We're moving generally to Richmond from our office with clients, because the prospects in Richmond are miles better than in Nelson. I always say Damon's Nelson interests, which we are tied up with, are in a dying position, whereas Damon should, and I hope will go out very soon to Richmond also with a branch out there. But now I had a client yesterday come and see me at 11 o'clock. Now he lives in Stoke, and he stipulated 11 o'clock because he said he wasn't going to get mixed up with all the traffic and all the road buggerising round that he found on coming into Nelson. He came in and saw us at 11 and left us at 12, and he said he would have a good trip. He had a good trip in and a good trip out.
Okay.
And
just about at full time, so you like to wrap up?
Right, wrap up, right. I would say that I hope that the new council have a more progressive policy. Forget about the Greens. The Greens are not progressive. All they are stubborn obstructions. And I'd like you to see you open up the parking better. Certainly don't alter Trafalgar Street angle parking, because the angle parking takes double the vehicles that parallel parking does, and Trafalgar Street is meant to be the main retail street. And car parking will govern whether that stays that way. Thank you.
Okay, Mr. Thompson, I think very, very clear submission. We've probably just got time for a question, if there's one. I don't see anyone asking any questions. Very, very clear submission about what your views are, so we'll leave it at that.
Right, thank you.
Okay, thanks very much, Mr. Thompson.
See ya.
Good. Okay, all right. Thanks. That concludes the public forum. Next item on the agenda is the confirmation of the minutes. I think that's pages 6 to 15 in your agenda. Been through them. Any questions or?
Happy to move those.
Okay, thanks, Councillor O'Neill-Stevens. Someone to second then? I'll second. No debate. I'll put it, those in favour that the confirms the minutes of the meeting of the Infrastructure Committee 23rd of June are true and correct record, moved by Councillor O'Neill-Stevens, seconded by me. And I'll put it, those in favour, aye, green tick. It's carried, thanks very much. Next item on the agenda is the adoption of the parking strategy and the parking management plans, pages 16 to 147, quite a lengthy document. And I'll invite Mrs. Parfitt to present your report. Mrs. Parfitt, you can take the report as read, but I'm sure there's matters that you wish to highlight. There probably have been some questions you'd like to respond to, anything else, any corrections. So I'll pass it over to you to present your report.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair. Well, thank you all for the opportunity to bring to you today the proposed parking strategy and associated parking management plans, which we are recommending for adoption. Joining me today, I'm hoping on this call, if not now shortly, some members of my team, Mrs. Sue McCauley, my transport team leader, Ms. Kylie Huard, who is the consultant from Stantec, who did a significant amount of engagement and preparation on the draft plan, and Mr. Alan Gray from our own city development team. So it is just over 4 months ago that we presented you with the draft strategy and sought your approval to take it out to our community for feedback. When we presented the draft strategy in March, I outlined its purpose, its strategic context, the objectives of it, and its importance. And I don't intend to repeat myself today, except to remind you that this is not just a parking strategy. It's one tool in our toolbox for us to draw on as we work toward a low carbon future. The strategy has been developed alongside improvements in public transport, an active transport strategy, which is currently out for feedback. I think it's just closed and is coming back to you in September at our next Infrastructure Committee meeting. And also alongside the ongoing work we're doing around speed management plan, which will come to Council early next triennium. All of those strategies, alongside the parking strategy and alongside the future development strategy and the city centre spatial plan, all and the programs that fall out of those strategies will help us bring about the changes we need to achieve the goals that you asked us to help you deliver as part of the long-term plan, the low carbon emissions, the increased modal shift, and the vital city centre. So the draft strategy went out for feedback for a 4-week period, and we received 145 submissions from individuals and groups. Not surprisingly, we had a very wide range of views expressed. We know that parking is personal and it's quite divisive, and we have listened to the feedback we have received. Our challenge as officers and your challenge as elected members is to find that balance, that sweet spot between meeting the community's expectations for cheap or free parking close to where they want to go and the access and safety needs of all mode users. And all of that is against the backdrop of lowering vehicle kilometres travelled, or what we call VKT, to achieve a low carbon future. So the changes to the strategy and the parking management plans are shown in the attachments to the report, with new wording highlighted in yellow and some formatting changes. We've just made some things a little bit more front and centre and bold through the change in formatting. There are not many changes to the draft, with the exception of some proposed changes in timing to the proposals. We heard from our business community that there is still some pain out there as those businesses recover from the effects of COVID-19 pandemic. When the draft strategy was written, we hadn't really anticipated Omicron or the long tail of and the ongoing effects of COVID. But we have listened to the businesses, and to that end, some of the initiatives initially proposed for the short term are still recommended for adoption, but we're suggesting slowing things down and ensuring that we engage further with the business community before introducing them. So some things moving from short term, 1 to 2 years, to 3 to 5 years following that business consultation, and just allowing that time for recovery. A reminder that the strategy is a very high-level strategy, and it sets the direction and provides the framework for future decisions around parking management. However, there will be further engagement and or consultation through the parking and vehicle control bylaw, maybe the long-term plan or the hearings panel other, before any on-the-ground changes come to fruition. There are some minor edits and errors in the report that I just want to draw your attention to. On pages 71 and 88 of your agenda, you will see the words error, reference source not found. Well, we thought we had removed that hyperlink, but it has snuck back in. Just ignore the words, we'll take them out. The sentence makes sense if you ignore those words, because the hyperlink points to the material that is below that in the text. It refers to a table and some counts that are still in the text of the report, but just ignore the hyperlink, and we will remove that from the final document. In addition, on page 29 of the agenda, under section 9, and I picked this one up late last night, Strawbridge Square, proposal 2 reads incorrectly in your agenda. Proposal 2 is actually to change all P5 and P15 in Strawbridge Square to P10. So something else has been transposed across that. Our apologies. The feedback that you see on page 29 is to the P5 and P15 changes. So the rest of it reads correctly, but I just wanted to draw your attention to that change, and I will make sure the governance advisors are aware of that for the minutes. I think the report is comprehensive, and I don't intend to go through each proposal unless the chair chooses to do that, but I'll take the report and its attachments as read, and my team and I are, I think, now all on board and are happy to take any questions you may have. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Great. Thanks, Mrs. Parfitt. Yeah, I'm not proposing we go through each of the proposals one by one, but happy to take questions. So I've got questions from Councillor Courtney, then Councillor Noonan, then Councillor Brand, in that order.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and thank you, Mark, Officer Parfitt, for your report and the options or the matters for consideration today. You mentioned COVID and the impacts of that. How did it impact on your going out to public consultation or engagement? What sort of impact did that make? I wonder whether 145 submissions is adequate feedback. What's your response to that, please?
Through the chair, we were quite happy with the 145. I think that's a pretty good number. A lot of pre-engagement was done prior to us compiling the draft. So that was done face-to-face with Kylie and Alan Gray. Very much, I think you were part of that as part of the city centre spatial plan. With the 4 weeks that this document was out for consultation, we did not have face-to-face interactions. We weren't at the Saturday market, for example. We did put together a webinar, which was posted on the council website, and a number of people viewed that. I don't think we had a large number actually attend. It was a live webinar with a Q&A opportunity, but it was recorded. And so some people went back and watched that afterwards. We also gave it quite a push through the media, and certainly after that, more submissions came in. So I think we had heard strongly from some of the businesses beforehand, face-to-face, and certainly the Chamber and the other businesses did send in submissions. So we have heard from them.
Thanks for that, Marg, and Officer Parfitt. And through again, Mr. Chair, if you'll indulge me, another question. On page 31 of your report, you make mention there about you're going to come back and have in the future consultations with Uniquely Nelson board. Marg, they have 600 plus membership, not just businesses and retail property owners and retailers, but professionals and right across all occupations. Why did you not go to them as part of the consultation?
So through the chair, as I said, we have worked with the businesses prior to compiling the draft. They were all invited to attend the webinar, but may have viewed the recorded webinar since. And on feedback, certainly we received something from the Chamber, which I think represents many of those business owners. And that's why we have agreed to, well, we're proposing to slow down some of our initiatives, because we're recognising that the business community is still struggling as the effects of COVID. So I think we did go to them, and I think we have heard from them, and I think we have listened to them. But what we're signalling is we need to do more work with them before we introduce these. Mr. Macaulay, would you add anything to that? You were at the coalface there.
Yeah, I was just going to add, through the chair, I was just going to add that Uniquely Nelson were a lot of the meetings that we had prior to the consultation, prior to developing the strategy. So they were very much part of the pre-engagement.
Thank you, Marg. As Sue, I should say. I'm looking thoroughly through this parking management plan and the parking strategy, and I see nothing there for the future in respect of Stoke, and I raised this earlier on, or Tahuna, and as a matter of fact, Nelson itself. Would you just like to discuss that with us a little further, please?
Well, through the chair, I think it is there. I think that the strategy talks about no net increase in parking and encouraging no net increase in parking. So the intention is that the need for the parking that we have will level out or hopefully diminish as we get more uptake of public transport and active transport modes. But the strategy also recognises that sometimes people need to drive a car, and it proposes that hierarchy. So the people in most need of parking, those with accessibility needs, the loading zones for the businesses and so on, are at the top of that hierarchy. So I mean, the intention of this, if we're looking to a low carbon future, is to reduce vehicle kilometres travelled, single occupancy trips, and the consequence of that is we won't need as much parking.
Thank you.
Okay, then Councillor Noonan, then Councillor Brand, Councillor Bowater, and then Mr. Porto, and then Councillor Neil Stevens.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thanks, Mark. Look, I've sent a couple of things to you. I'm going to have to be honest up front, because I thought I had yesterday afternoon to finish reading this agenda, and I realised I didn't. I had another meeting that took up the whole time, so I haven't completely finished. So I've been quite good on some of it, but I'm failing on the rest. So I will concentrate on the bits that I have read. I guess the first question is that there must be a baseline number of car parks that we've got. When we say we're going to have no net increase, what is the number that we've got that we're going to have as a base number?
Through the chair, I don't have that right in front of me right now. Officer Sue, Officer Macaulay, do you know that off the top of your head?
Through the chair, do you mean in the city centre or overall the whole of the city?
The city.
I'm just looking at the moment.
That's okay. I didn't anticipate, because that is one I should have sent through, but it was just something that I was.
No, I do have it here. I do have it here. It's actually on page 66 of your agenda.
Thank you.
It's got the supply, so it's 1,400 public parking spaces in the city centre.
Okay.
Approximately estimate. So we're not saying that's the baseline, though. It's we're just basically saying that's what's there at the moment.
Okay, so what's there at the moment? So when that was put, that 1,400 was set on. Have we taken any away since then? I don't know when that number was set.
Sorry, through the chair, there's always things changing in the city centre because there's things coming and going. So there may have been a few changes. I haven't got the date that was actually counted on, but you know, every year we have minor changes of parking, you know, things happening, outdoor dining being put in, outdoor dining being taken out, and various, you know, minor changes. So it may be slightly less than that, but we haven't had any significant changes.
Okay, so I guess the public would be thinking, okay, we've got around 1,400 at this point in time.
Yeah.
Okay. My next question is regarding, there's a couple of things peppered through. So, and I guess I'm looking at it from the point of view at working with other departments of council, and I've got two examples of that. The changes to the new, the changes to the new development, not requiring car parking on site, but we've heard from people that they've been discouraged from, so developers are being discouraged or finding it extremely difficult to put car parking on their building sites. And now we've got the possibility of car parking being removed in the streets. So how are different departments of council talking to each other about that? Because if it were someone building, I think they'd probably prefer to have off-street parking, but are also finding that council's not helping them there. So how are we going to get around that? Or have you had discussions with that department of council? Might be Alan.
Through the chair, I'm not quite sure where the impression has come that we are being obstructive or not helping. If a developer chooses to put off-street car parking on their development site, they can, but they need to comply with the land development manual, which means we have some minimum rules around turning spaces. You know, they can't reverse out onto a street, that sort of thing. So that's in the land development manual, and developers have worked with the land development manual for years. So I'm not quite sure where the impression that we're being obstructive has come from. And of course, the developers are well aware of the National Policy Statement on Urban Development, that they don't have to provide off-street parking, and they haven't had to provide off-street parking in the city centre for a number of years prior to that national statement. So it's their call, but if they are going to provide it, they must comply with the LDM, the Land Development Manual.
Right, so that's really where and I'm totally acknowledging it's not your Department of Transport, but it's just that I have had a number of developers say they're not going to bother anymore because it's just too difficult to try and get it. So it's another department that we need to work with potentially, isn't it?
Well, through the chair, I think the developers will respond to the market. If they can't sell an apartment without off-street parking, I'm sure they'll find a way.
And the other one was in relation to talking to other departments, and it's the one with the parking and potentially charging in reserves in the future. And I just wonder, have you spoken with Parks and Facilities? Because I guess the bit that was missing for me was the purpose of the car parks and the reserves is to support the activity in the reserves, being sport, entertainment, conferences, etc. And I see that you're going to try and look at the reserves parking in the future. Is that something that will happen then?
Through the chair, Officer Macaulay.
Through the chair, yes, we have discussed this with the Parks and Reserves team. The reason why we're even mentioning it is that at the moment, that parking, because it's uncontrolled, that parking is frequently not available for the users of the facilities. And there has been situations over recent times where there has been some conflict between the commuter parkers and the facilities operators when they've tried to tell the commuters, you can't park here. So it was what the reason for that aspect is to try and provide some control, because there are many, many days when that parking would remain empty if we banned all parking there other than facility users. So we're trying to get the maximum use out of the space, the land that is available, and make it appropriate for the users of the reserves, and make it a city centre resource at other times. So it's to try and get that balance and the maximum use of what's a very, very valuable land resource.
Yeah, and it is close to the city, so I can see why
Absolutely.
people use it for parking. So I think in Trafalgar Centre, there's they close it when there's an event on, so that's a mechanism that's been trialled, and I assume that's working quite well.
Well, through the chair, that's where some of the conflict has occurred in recent years. Commuters that are normal, that park there, maybe 6 weeks out of 10 weeks of the year, they expect to be able to park there, and when it's closed, they have been getting somewhat upset about that, and haven't. I was trying to find the right word, so we're just trying to resolve that situation.
Okay, so it's a bit of trial and error, or trying different things. At time limits, is that something that's been considered potentially? Turnover time limits and things
Through
like
the
that?
chair, it's both time limits and I understand at the moment there are limited options through the Reserves Act. So we just have to work through that as well.
Okay.
The time limits would be the first. Yeah.
I see that's something coming up in 3 to 5 years. Okay, so I'll move on to my next. I've got one more query, and then I've just got a comment about how it's set up. Did anybody request parking for young mums?
Through the chair, I don't think that came up specifically. We have taken a very a broad approach. What's accessible for older, less physically able people generally suits young mums with preems and babies as well. So, cradle to the grave sort of.
Yeah. So, but to use the accessibility, can young mums apply for that potentially if they've maybe had a cesarean, or they can't go far, or?
Through the chair, if you're referring to the mobility permits, that's administered by CCS. It's not a council-run scheme; it's a national scheme, and generally, I think they have. I think it's a 6-month minimum, so I'm not sure that they would qualify.
Okay. Just a thought, but we can accommodate that in the future, can't we? If
something you can deal with in parking management plans as well.
Okay. And then just a comment, and I actually found this really helpful to read. It was set out really well. I just thought that something when it's adopted. Maybe there could be a section where it's got the 1 to 2 years and all the work that's proposed, and 3 to 5 years all the work that's proposed, because I had sort of peppered through, but it's not sort of be good to see it all in one place. So that's just a commentary, really. Is that possible?
Through the chair, councillor, are you referring to the strategy? I mean, the tables of the parking management plans. I think the strategy is high level. The parking management plans are quite fluid and are live documents. So we wouldn't want to put that level of detail necessarily in the high level strategy. They sit in the parking management plans that are evolving.
Okay, cool.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks very much.
Good. Councillor Brand, your turn.
Thank you. Through the chair. A couple of things have been crossed off already. So I've just got an overall question, which is basically throughout the report, it mentions work with different groups or individuals. What does council actually mean by that? And how do you plan to do it?
Through the chair, that would be through our normal engagement processes. We have a number of stakeholders over a number of subjects, and we have an engagement specialist, Mr. Paul Shattuck, who helps us set up appropriate meetings or opportunities to engage, depending on what the subject matter is, depending on what the COVID environment is. So, for example, I think to give an example, we're talking about working with business owners in the future. So we would go through the appropriate channels, whether it's Uniquely Nelson or the Chamber, or we'd have something down at the CoLab. It varies depending on who we're talking to and what we're talking about. But, we're listening, and we would set up opportunities to hear people's feedback.
So that, because through the report it talks about at different stages where people opposed or people weren't, they were happy with certain parts, but they weren't happy with other bits within that. And it said about, we'll go back and discuss. I mean, Uniquely Nelson was one, and then there was Tony Bowater about the e-cars, and then there was the Tahuna Business Group, and then there was multiple different things. So how do you plan on doing that? Because you've identified certain groups, but what about other users that may impact? How do you plan on incorporating them into that?
So through the chair, the examples you gave, we will set up a meeting with, say, Mr. Bowater. We are planning a meeting with the Uniquely Nelson board. So as I said, it varies from subject to subject. With regard to actual changes on the ground, that comes through either the vehicle control bylaw or the hearings panel other. And those are, so the hearings panel other, if we're putting in no stopping or putting in a mobility park, we engage with, consult with those directly affected people. So we send them a letter saying, this is what we're proposing. Can you please come contact us, give us your feedback? And then we compile that feedback into a report that goes to the hearing panel other that make the decisions about what happens on the ground. If it's bigger than that, and it's say about parking charges, then it would be a special consultative procedure either through the vehicle control bylaw or the long-term plan.
Okay, thanks. So with so where it's identified in the report under the different, like I said, there's various ones throughout. Is that sort of, with that engagement or conversation or work with, basically start at that period of time? So like in 1 year's time or 2 years time or 3 years time or something, or how far out just following through in the report when it's like, this is in year 1 or this is in year 3 or this is, so when would that start, that level of conversation start? Like how far out from that or backwards from that point?
Through the chair, I think we're having conversations with the key stakeholders on a continual basis. I mean, we've already heard from the Tahuna Nui Business and Citizens Association, for example, and are planning another meeting with them shortly to discuss where mobility car parks go. So it's ongoing. If it was a specific initiative that we wanted to talk about, whether it's, say, graduated parking, which might be proposed for the midterm, then we would start that process early enough so that we can get through the process as resources dictate, really. So we maintain a relationship with these people, I think, along the way, but the content of a specific engagement would be timely, would be, well, if we need to have this conversation prior to the annual plan, we need to start now. So it does vary depending on exactly what the initiative is.
Okay, thank you.
Councillor Bowater.
Maria, thank you very much. Some of the questions have been touched on, so I won't go into them anymore, but I am pleased to see, because on page 26, proposal 3, adopt proposal, there's consultation given, and then in another couple, there's more in detail consultation given, and it's all around the Tahuna business, citizens, etc. So I'm pleased to see, Marg, that you just mentioned that, because that's something that I'd like to see come through as well. Also too, the infamous structure plan of 2004, which I mentioned it was in the March meeting. I'm just wondering around that. I see that it's been page 27, it's come through, that's going to be progressed through to the LTP. My question around it is, if that structure plan of 2004, which to be honest, I haven't seen its life before myself, if that had come through, what impact would that have on what Whakatahi want to do through Tahuna at the moment? Because to me, it looks like now that 2004 plan is going to be considered and put towards what Whakatahi is saying they want to do through Tahuna now. But if that plan and structure had actually been done in 2004 and implemented coming through, then Whakatahi would have been having to consider what was already there as foundations. So are Whakatahi aware of the structure 2004 plan? Have they seen it? Do they understand, or does it work in? Just If I could have a comment on that, please. And I've got another question as well.
Through the chair, I'm not really familiar with the Tunanui structure plan because it is a long time ago, as you say. I know that it talked about turning the village around so that it was facing the beach, less severance of state highway. How exactly it would impact on Mokukotahi's plans, I'm not sure, because I don't know the level of detail in front of me right now. I'm pretty sure they're aware of it. And where that structure plan goes is a decision for council. It's not an officer's decision. It's something that we are suggesting is looked at again, but that's for the elected representatives to decide.
Okay, thank you. Yeah, and also to page 82 again. It's the parking activity in Tahuna, etc. There's going to be, it's recommended that there's no additional public parking spaces provided because it's a seasonal area, and there's quite a lot of more parking, etc. Used over the summer months. Has any thought and consideration being given to the impact if there is no more parking? Because I know we've got another piece coming through that didn't come through on the last council meeting that will be coming back again, that's also about parking and the concerns. I'm just wondering how much flexibility we may have to put around our consideration and understanding of what Tahuna's parking needs really are. And are you confident with what we've got here, or are we going to be able to revisit that again?
Well, through the chair, I am confident with what we've got here. I mean, Tahunanui is growing and it is an area that is earmarked for intensification. And the parking strategy says we will monitor parking in those areas, and nothing changes until the trigger for 85% fully occupied situation arises. And that's when you go through the hierarchy of interventions, which would be initially time limits, then perhaps paid parking. And you do all of those things before you add more parking. Tahunanui is well served by the bus route. It is increasingly well served by active transport corridors. Acknowledging that Rocks Road is still a barrier from the north, but we're working on that. So absolutely. Just to add more parking, there are a whole lot of steps that we would do well before that, and that's what the parking plan identifies. Is there's a staged approach to manage the growth and intensification and demand.
Great, and as is mentioned, as their consultation will be with the community, so I see that as a good thing. Page 70, I raised that as a question. Has that been looked at around the library development?
So through the chair, you'll see that the word potentially is highlighted in yellow in the revised parking management plan because it is potential. We don't know. That's why it's highlighted and added.
Exactly, because I know that you've popped that word in, as you said earlier, after, but it's just that the location as yet has not been confirmed as that. So as long as that's the understanding that we'll have around that piece on page 70, then that's fine. Thanks very much, Mark.
Right. I've got next on my list is Mr. Porto.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Tēnā koe, Mark. Just want to acknowledge all the hard work that's obviously gone into this document by you and your team. Are you just able to talk through the consultation process specifically in terms of our Māori community and what particular groups have been engaged as a part of that process?
Kia ora. Yes, Naomi, the fact that we were doing, through the chair, sorry, the fact that we were doing this strategy was on the agenda, I think it's at the back of the report somewhere, for the iwi Managers Forum some time ago. I think it was May last year. So they were made aware that we were doing it. And at that point, if anybody had said, we're really interested in this, we want to have more input in this, then we would have progressed that. There weren't any specific hui that were carried out as a result of this, but it was known through the iwi Managers Forum, I believe. Sue, Officer Macaulay, correct me if I haven't got that forum right. I think it is that one. Along with a number of other work streams that the transport team are doing, we make sure that that is communicated and we look for any indication of interest at an early stage, because we know that we are at capacity in terms of engagement and feedback. So we gave very, very early notice that this was in our works plan. And from memory, we didn't hear anybody saying, please, can you come back and talk to us about that? So it kind of stopped there, except for the general engagement and promotion of the fact that we were seeking feedback.
Thanks for that, Marg. Yeah, I think I would really like to see in future how we have a conversation about, you know, more broadly in terms of infrastructure matters, but these types of matters, given the capacity constraints that you sort of flagged, you know, just putting it on an agenda of a very, very busy and thinly spread group, you know, if that's our future pathway in terms of getting signal of any interaction or engagement needs with Māori, it's not a strong signal. And so I think we need to think a bit differently about how we do that. And the engagement manager person that you spoke to, maybe that's an opportunity to work with that person and maybe get some other feedback and input in around how your team within council engages with Māori on these particular matters, because I think a different type of approach may be required in future, but that's something for us to work on going forward. So yeah, that'd be good.
Thank you.
Okay, Councillor Neil Stevens, then Councillor Fulton.
Kia ora, thanks. And would just entirely echo Naomi's comments, especially around the hard work that's gone into this, and thanks for all of that. First question, just around proposal 18 and the cordoning of parking revenue from that sort of central city area. What are the implications of removing investigating that?
Through the chair. So at the moment, the parking revenue goes into a general account. It used to be ring-fenced, and then I think in 2014, whenever 1 hour parking was introduced, it changed and it goes into a general account. And I can say that inner city initiatives are funded from that account. So the Wi-Fi, the hanging baskets, Uniquely Nelson comes out of that account already. So although it's not specifically ring-fenced, there isn't enough parking revenue to cover contribution to public transport. So it used to some time ago, and then when 1 hour free came in, the way the accounting is done changed. So I will say that at the moment, it's parking revenue supports the central city, but it's not specifically ring-fenced, and there isn't enough money coming from parking revenue at the moment to cover all of those costs plus contribute to public transport.
And with the proposed changes, we're expecting an increase long-term in parking revenue, is that correct?
Through the chair, we've seen an increase in parking revenue since we went to pay by plate. Will we get an increase in revenue? I can't predict what the parking charges will be, and I can't predict what the demand will be. I mean, if we are successful, we'll have less people driving into town and paying for their parking and more people using buses, so and biking and walking. So I can't predict what the future revenue will be. I think that's why we're proposing that we push it out and have this discussion next time we review the parking strategy in terms of ring fencing it.
Okay, thanks. And then just within the strategy, there is comment around that relationship between parking and active transport, and looking specifically at the parking hierarchy. Where does that sort of sit in within that hierarchy?
Through the chair, council, I'm not quite sure of the question.
So specifically, it acknowledges that in some locations, you know, and I think it specifically acknowledges on Waimea Road, there will be trade-offs between parking and safe active transport routes, cycleways, and possibly the removal of parking. And so within our hierarchy, where does that sit in that decision making?
So through the chair, I think there is a huge overlap between this strategy and the active transport strategy that we're bringing back to you in September. And this strategy does refer to reallocation of road space. So if we need to remove roadside parking to, for example, create a separated cycleway that is safe, this strategy alludes to that, and it is strengthened in the active transport strategy that we're bringing to you next month. So in terms of the hierarchy, you may recall when we workshopped this, I think I showed a graphic that had walking, cycling at the top, and then public transport, and then the private motor vehicle was further down that pyramid. But we recognise that some people have to drive, and those drivers that have particular accessibility needs or particular business needs, such as loading zones, are further up than the person who's just driving to work because they don't want to do it any other way. So in terms of hierarchy, walking, cycling, active modes at the top, public transport, business needs and accessibility needs, and then the commuter who drives because it's comfortable, sort of at the bottom of that hierarchy.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, done. Councillor Fulton, your turn.
Oh, thanks. Brian, can you hear me okay?
Yep.
Great. Look, I've just got a couple of questions around electric vehicles, carpooling, ride sharing, I guess electric bikes as well. I can see it's further down in the document on about page 21, but in the introduction, it's fairly silent on, it talks about sustainable transport as walking, cycling or busing. And I guess I'm curious why you haven't included electric cars, carpooling, ride sharing as sort of viable ways of switching to a more sustainable transport option. Plus, you seem fairly silent on single occupancy vehicles. I agree with Gail that there's a big difference between a mother with young babies or a mother with 3 children, or a father for that matter. But that sometimes we have a lot of cars parking with just one person in them versus cars parking with multiple people in them is still more sustainable in terms of that large car use. Why is that not touched on in the introduction?
Through the chair, it's peppered throughout the strategy. I think, as I've just said, the hierarchy is about those with accessibility needs, and that includes mothers and babies or people who can't walk a long distance. So they're up above the single occupant person who just wants to drive. Your comment about EVs and e-bikes, it is in there. There is a proposal that we investigate that, and I know that the climate change team have already done some work with car sharing schemes. And we have said in the proposal that we will investigate further micro-mobility schemes that might include concessionary schemes for e-bikes, such as Lime's e-bikes or e-scooters. So it is in there. It may not be front and centre, because that probably is more, well, it's across both this strategy and our active transport strategy. This is a parking strategy, so I suppose the introduction focuses on parking management, but inherent to all of that is mode shift and alternate modes.
I guess if you're ride sharing or carpooling, though, you might end up with a ride share where you have one car being used by multiple families or multiple people. If you're carpooling, you're taking one car to town with 2 or 3 commuters in. So your requirement on a car park is less because you only need 1 car park versus 3 car parks or 4 car parks. And I guess I would have thought I would see that on page 4, where you talk to a sustainable transport culture. Doesn't mean literally every commuter will bus, walk or cycle to work. I feel like you could expand that. We can increase the number of people who are carpooling, ride sharing, using micro-mobility. I just feel like it needs to be higher up. I appreciate it's peppered through, but I feel like it needs to be sitting at the top of the document so that people start thinking, well, sustainable transport doesn't just mean I have to bike or walk or take the bus, that there are ways I can be more sustainable if I need to use a car, because some people do live in fairly tricky locations and we're aware that our public bus transport system isn't working. But I just feel like it needs to be a bit spelt out a bit more earlier on. likewise, that I guess I see that there will be a bit of a revolution in terms of electric biking. The more we can support our cycleways to become safer, so people can encouraged to get on. Some of these electric bikes are pretty amazing in terms of their ability to carry. Lots of people don't bike because they have to carry so much stuff, but some of those cargo bikes are a key part of a sustainable transport future, and I feel like we need to highlight those alongside walking, cycling and busing, because I think at the moment people just think of those three things as modal shift. I'd see all of them as modal shift.
What? Is there a question in there?
Well, my question is why haven't you put it in at the start? And Marg's given me some feedback, but my feedback is I'd like it in a bit earlier. I know you can do some minor edits, Brian, so that's my feedback, is that it's not my debate. Is it possible, Marg, to reword some of that earlier on in the document? That's my question.
Through the chair, if the chairperson is satisfied that it's not a significant change and it's a tweak, and I think it is a tweak, I think it's just that we're bringing some stuff that's in there further forward in the document. We're not making a substantive change then. I think that's possible. Officer Macaulay, you support that that proposal that we just bring?
Yeah, through the chair. Yeah, I mean, we can change the emphasis at the beginning of the meeting, but at the beginning of the report, but we just have to be very careful in that EVs still have to be, electric vehicles still have to be parked, and they can still be single occupancy vehicles. So they're not the answer to the parking problem.
I completely agree with that, but it is still better than fossil fuel vehicle, and I guess that hierarchy, maybe the hierarchy figure comes in earlier. I feel like a lot of people don't read past the first 4-5 pages of a document. They're not going to go into page 21 of your document and see that you've covered it off there. And on page 4, why do we manage parking? No, was it page 4? Sorry, I've lost it. I've just switched to electronic agendas, and sometimes, so it's like page 4 of the strategy, page 42 of our agenda. Why does Nelson need a parking strategy? You talk about parking as one element of a holistic, sustainable transport system, but then on the entire page, sustainable transport sounds like it's just walking, cycling and biking. Well, and I feel like it needs to be a bit more expanded.
Yeah, through the chair, we can expand that description.
Thank you.
Quite easily.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Great.
Yeah, but I would re-emphasise the point that we're making. This is a parking strategy, and an EV, whether it's a ICE or an EV, is still a vehicle that the parking of it needs to be managed.
Absolutely, but it's a parking strategy which is also setting a goal for decreasing carbon emissions. That's one of the goals of it. So an EV might take up space, but it says we aim to meet greenhouse gas emission goals. So an EV does help us meet the greenhouse gas emission goals, and certainly carpooling and ride shares will help us meet those goals as well. Like the embodied carbon of a vehicle, if 5 families own one vehicle or choose not to own a vehicle and they use ride share instead, that's a significant shift in sustainable transport. Plus it eases parking, parking requirements.
Okay, thanks,
Thank you.
Kate. Rightio. Hey, look, we've been going for just over an hour. Do you want to have a break now for about 10 minutes? And we'll come back for debate if there's no more questions. Okay, with that, we'll take a 10-minute break, and you'll be back online ready to go at 1:15. Wait for everybody to come back.
Brian?
Yep.
I've just been having a conversation with somebody about the net number. I'm just wondering, can we add a clause that establishes at some point, establishes a net number? Because when we talk about no going below us, no
increase.
Yeah, we need to actually establish something, because otherwise it's just irrelevant.
Okay, well, ask the question. I'll see what the officer's advice would be.
Okay.
Do I have? Yeah.
Otherwise it doesn't mean anything really. Thank you.
Okay, we'll just ask the question when we.
Will do. Yeah, thank you.
Brian, just so you know, I can't turn my video on because the host has stopped it. So whoever's hosting, if you could let me video again, that'd be cool. That'd be great. Thank you.
All right. There you
go. Also, Brian, I've got a quick question, if that's all right.
Yeah, we'll do another round of questions.
Okay.
All right, we've got 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. Right, quorum back. So we'll resume the meeting after the break. What I'll do is I'll signal that I'll move the recommendation as per the agenda. So if someone's prepared to second, thanks, Councillor Neil Stevens. So that's at least on the table, but I've got a list of questions here. I've got Councillor Sanson, Councillor Noonan, and Councillor Laurie. So we'll get underway. Councillor Sanson.
Kia ora koutou. Thanks so much, Brian. Thank you through the chair. Kia ora, Marg, and your team. Thanks for the great work. Just super, yep, really stellar work. I just want to say thanks. My question is, I mean, I guess it is related to the parking strategy, but you may not be able to answer it, so I'll just give it a go and just let me know what you think. But I got the Nelson Sustainable Transport group sent through a diagram to me recently, which showed that within the 4 avenues of the city centre, so the real heart of our city centre, 45% of the, I think it's 44% to be exact, but 44% of the land space is actually taken up with either car parks or car yards or road or fuel stations, so kind of fossil fuel and car prioritization. And I just wondered whether there's ever been discussions or any thoughts had around the idea of doing some kind of a change, I don't know if it would be a plan change, to make things like car yards and petrol stations an industrial activity, so that they were kind of discouraged from being in the, in a city centre. Any thoughts on that?
Well, it's probably a question completely unrelated to the parking strategy, but
yes and no. I mean, the only thing is that so much of our inner city centre is currently prioritised for cars, really. So I think it's, like not directly applicable to this strategy now, but it's kind of relevant to the bigger conversations that we're having around, what our focus is and how we're going to try and shift our city centre to being for people and low carbon and, housing and small businesses and, kind of enliven it.
So through the chair, if I can comment, look, I think you'll find this parking strategy is about people. It's making the city centre more people-centric. And we've got a number of things. Alan's, Officer Gray's city centre spatial plan, Te Aroa Whakatū. We've got the Bridge Street linear corridor. That's about that. The bigger conversation about zoning is not in my lane. That's a planning conversation. So that's something to take up with planning.
Thanks so much, Marg, and it's great to hear about all the other initiatives underway to, kind of make our city centre for people. Thanks. No further questions.
Thanks, Councillor. Councillor Noonan, you've got your question.
Yes, thank you. And as discussed when we came back, just slightly further on to the number of car parks that we have at the moment and the commentary that there is no net increase, I think that we should probably have something in the resolutions that adopts a number to give public confidence that they know that there is a number. I think it probably help all parties in the future to actually establish a number because we're talking about no net increase. I think you've got to have something there to establish. Some comment, some response on that would be good.
Certainly.
Yeah, go ahead, Ms. Parfitt.
Through the chair, I would be very reluctant to put that into the strategy. If we are successful in achieving mode shift, ride share, walking and cycling, then we may not need as many car parks. And to put a minimum number of car parks in the strategy, I think goes against the intent of it, which we've also got projects like the linear active transport corridor on Bridge Street in train. We've got Allen's city spatial work. We don't know exactly what the net reduction of car parks will be from that work yet. That's going to come through detailed design. So, or not even detailed design, high level spatial design. So to put a minimum number of car parks to be retained in the strategy is not something I would support.
So I'm looking at it from the other way. So it's no net increase means that you're not going to go above a number rather than the opposite.
So through the chair, no net increase in publicly provided.
Yes.
Well, it's there. It's no net increase. So you want to see an actual number there.
I think we need a number because otherwise people might say, well, we thought there was 1,700 car parks when there weren't 1,700 car parks. You've got to have something somewhere to acknowledge that we're not going to go above this number. This is the maximum we've got now. We're not going to go any more. So through the opposite to what I think you thought.
Through the chair, Sue, Officer Macaulay, are you page 7 of the strategy says street space allocation principles? Has that got a number attached to it? I'm just sorry. Looking for that.
Through the chair, that section is guides us as to how we allocate our street space. So it's indicating that it's always going to be a movable feast as things change in the city. So it's quite difficult to specify what the number's going to be. And if you want it as a ceiling, then and the numbers that we just alluded to earlier about the number that's in the city centre parking management plan, which was 1,400, is the number that we would be providing as what's there at the moment. I mean, I can get that double checked as to what's on the ground at the date of the implementation of the parking strategy, but as I said, it changes, constantly. Yeah, if you want a ceiling, that's the number that we would be providing. It's in the order of that number.
I'll see what others think.
Okay.
Thanks.
All right, thanks. Councillor Laurie, then Councillor Brandon, who your worship.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you everyone for the work that's gone into this, and kia ora everyone. 2 questions from me. One, when we think about the future of our parking squares, there is a part of the document which talks about how in the long term, 5 to 10 years, we'll investigate opportunities to redevelop the central city parking squares. This is at 6.44, e.g. mixed use development of residential, commercial and parking. The purpose of this proposal is to use valuable land more efficiently, enhance the place value of the central city and consolidate parking, which is music to my ears because there is a number of people in this community who would love to see us doing something more creative and productive with the parking squares in terms of the airspace in particular above them. Hopefully retaining the parking for the public on the ground floor, but using the airspace in a way that provides housing. Is there anything in this document that I've missed that in any way might hinder that opportunity?
Through the chair, I don't believe so. The officers are recommending adopting the proposal 21, which is just exactly what you've described. And it ticks a lot of boxes. It is about livability, amenity, more people living in the city centre. So the proposal is that we investigate those opportunities. It's a wee way out, it's 5 to 10 years, but I don't see anything in the document that would hinder it.
Thank you very much, Officer Barfoot. Follow-up question through the chair. Do you think that there's any possibility we might better bring this forward? I mean, does 5 to 10 years mean we can't talk about it for 5 to 10 years?
No. Through the chair, I'm not quite sure what that conversation looks like at the moment. Officer Gray, do you have a view on whether we could bring this forward as part of the city centre spatial plan?
Kia ora, and through the chair, thanks, Marg. I guess, you know, we need to leverage opportunity as it comes forward. And so I think, well, Tara Whakatu's view was to kind of, we look more at the sort of on-street opportunities for people in place. We more or less didn't go into any of the squares, but looking at the airspace opportunity that's been discussed here, or there might be things around how we create new public transport links or hubs and things like that. We'll need to consider that, I guess, as opportunity arises to do that type of work. Thank you.
Thank you. So through the chair, does that mean it's possible? Possible we could be discussing this before 5 to 10 years?
Who wants? Which of the officers wants to answer that? Rory, Mr. Gray.
Well, we're already talking about that with the Kaingaora development possibility. I mean, not that that's going to have huge impact, but that's already something that this current council is in discussion on. So there are parts of that that are happening currently. Okay,
great. Thank you very much. One more question to the chair, please. I just want to pick up on Jane Murray from Nelson Marlborough Health when she spoke in public forum on a related matter. She talked about our goals for increasing the number of people walking and cycling. And she said they would love to see us treble that rather than double it. Any response to that from staff?
Well, through the chair, Ms Murray's submission today was in reference to the active transport strategy, which is something we're bringing back to this committee in September. So when we've collated all of the feedback, and we will bring you a report on the 1st of September on that matter.
Okay, thanks.
Thanks, Councillor Brand.
Yep, just very quickly, I'd just like it taken in parts, please. I'd like to have the received taken separately from the other recommendations. Thank you.
Okay, that's fine. Do that. Your Worship.
Kia ora, Mr. Chair. I just want to support Councillor Noonan's request that we do establish what the net current numbers are, and it'll be useful maybe if we could just get that number, if this is coming up to council, if we could just have that recorded, because I actually think it is important so that we can make sure you know, that we're not moving around unexpectedly around that number. So I think we need to hold that. And I think what is important for is actually, if we're thinking about private parking in that scenario as well, what we want to make sure is that we're not that we've got a really good read actually on what the numbers are, so we can hold that. So there's no point having we'll have no net increase if we don't know what the current number is, and then we can be really clear on that with the public and with other consenting processes that might come through for seeking private car parking. I'm not sure what the way the officers might like to comment on how they do that in the document, or whether, and I think it should be in the document just to record that this is the current level, and yes, it will fluctuate a bit and it might go down from that, but what we don't want to do is going over that.
Certainly, through the chair, we can certainly put that in the parking management plan for the city centre, which is an appendix to this document, just to set some context. So we can do that. But the parking management plan is a live document that will show fluctuations, but we'll put it in there for context. We'll get that number.
Thank you very much.
Okay. Thanks. Right, no more questions. Right, it's been moved. The recommendations as per the agenda have been moved by myself and seconded by Councillor Neil Stevens. So we'll open up for any debate. Councillor Noonan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Look, I am going to support this going through to council. It is, as the staff have said, very dependent on public transport increasing and people using public transport, potentially also sharing transport, which many of us already do. Look, I think that living in the city certainly improves or reduces their need for using vehicles to the point that I would encourage people who don't use their cars very often to make sure that they actually have them serviced, because if you're not using your vehicle very much, you will have very thick oil, as per myself. So very important that we do share, and it's great that people do offer to take people from place to place, and it's happening more and more, and it's a great way to live, and I'd encourage people to live in the city, and this is what this strategy is going to encourage to do. So I am supportive of it, but it is very dependent on public transport being available to people and further than just the main routes. So I'm looking forward to seeing how that will work. So we'll move it up to council from here. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Noonan. Councillor Courtney, then Councillor Brand.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm going to vote against this today for 4 reasons, really, Mr. Chair. And first is, I think the timing is inappropriate. I really do. And Mark commented on this, made reference to it during her presentation. And it's to do with COVID. And it's to do with people. And the world is we're in the midst of a worldwide pandemic. And I just don't want to see, and I don't think any of us do actually around the table, definitely not, any more discomfort brought or uncertainties brought on the people of this city, whether it be in the CBD, in Nelson City, or out at Stoke or Tahuna. We just don't want to see it. Any more concerns. People are worried about their health, their family's health. Businesses, as we know, are closing and contracting back as work and sales take a nosedive. And some businesses are still closing and more will. And others, bless them, are hanging on in an effort to retain their, dare I say, their pride and to keep people employed. So I'm not convinced that this is the right time for this. I really don't. Also, I'm not convinced by the strategy or the management plan that sufficient consideration has been given to our larger than average number of older folk that reside in our city and suburbs of Stoke and Tahuna. They have special needs. And I think we need to take some time with this, slow things down, and to some degree, the officers have recognised that by pushing out some of the dates, and that pleased me. So it's, when you look at the consultation, that's been done during COVID. And Mr. Chair, I don't think that's conducive to worthwhile and good feedback either. 175, Officer Parfitt is happy with that, but I'm apprehensive about it. I think we should have done much, much better. It's going to make a big impact on people's lives, and until they see what's coming down the track, like public transport encouraged and other initiatives, carpooling and sharing and those type of things, I think to some degree we're putting the cart before the horse. I would go so far as to say. And I've got to point out the fact that only about every proposal, it's now called, not a recommendation, it's now called a proposal, many of them had 2/3 of the respondents against them. So that should send a red flag to us as councillors and think, well, are we listening to them? Because then we proceed with this in light of the fact that, you know, on this proposal and that proposal, only two-thirds weren't happy. And finally, Mr. Chair, I think we've got to look to Nelson's future. And it seems as though we're shutting the door on what will be, after we come through this COVID pandemic, we will have a new council, new fresh ideas and initiatives. We will have a thriving city, healthy city, vibrant, but we mustn't shut the door on things such as planning initiatives for car parking. It shouldn't be a dirty word because some people in this city absolutely depend on it, cars and vehicles. And they're feeling ostracised, some of them in our community at the present time, with the way we are talking. So they've all got to come on the journey and be happy and pleased and proud of it. So to some degree, it pains me to tell you that I'm voting against this today, but something deep down in my inner self tells me that we need to slow it down and take as many as we can on the journey, and not 175. That's not adequate as far as I'm concerned. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thanks, Councillor Courtney. Councillor Brands, speaking for or against the recommendation.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. I just want to thank all the time and the energy that's gone into this. There are a number of actions in it that have been well received, and there is good support for a number of actions. However, I have spoken with numerous people as individuals and business owners from the city centre, the Fringe, Tahuna and in Stoke, and there were a very common and clear message from all areas. They are anxious and concerned about their livelihoods and their ability to enjoy the region that they live in and how they can access their region, their home, and the impacts that this may have on their level of enjoyment of where they live. So they felt that their concerns were not heard, and that they were concerned that they felt that they were being talked at, and basically that they need to get with the program. And any concerns that they raised, they felt they were dismissed. And the constant message I received from all areas was they didn't believe or trust the Nelson City Council would indeed work with them to find appropriate solutions, and that the comment was disingenuous. Therefore, as we are accepting this as a whole, I will be voting against the adoption of this.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Stenson, speaking for or against the recommendation.
Kia ora koutou. Thanks so much, Brian. Thank you through the chair. I'm speaking in support. I just want to acknowledge again the really great work of staff. I don't think that it's fair of us to blame the staff for low engagement on this in a time when, you know, we're doing lots and lots of kind of submit, you know, asking for the community to submit on a lot of different strategies. I think that often people don't submit if they don't feel strongly about it. And I know that our community is really looking for us to show courageous leadership in the face of climate change. We have a mandate to be doing that. We have a legislative requirement to be moving all of our policies and strategies in that direction. And we also have a responsibility to the community in terms of the four wellbeing. So we really need to be thinking if the same approach and kind of business as usual approach to parking is really serving, is the kind of future we want to see in our community. I'm really concerned that if we don't adopt this and, get on with some of these things, that Nelson is actually really going to be left behind. It is just going to be known as a place where you come to retire because it's really easy to drive your car around and park everywhere. Whereas actually I know a lot of older people, in their 80s who still who cycle everywhere, who are wanting to be able to cycle and walk safely around the heart of the city centre. They want to be able to live in the city centre, to be able to sell their properties, and obviously that applies to all ages. And I think we need to be thinking about Nelson as a city that is appealing to people of all ages. And that means that if we're going to attract, keep younger people here and attract younger professionals into the kind of innovative industries that we're looking at developing around the seafood sector, science and technology, the digital strategies, we need to be acknowledging that they are wanting a city that really is for people, where that is vibrant, accessible, inclusively accessible, that people can safely get around in wheelchair or mobility scooter or e-scooter or on foot, or on-demand public transport or using share cars. So I just, I hear my colleagues' concerns, and I absolutely acknowledge that we've had a difficult, that the community is still facing an immensely difficult time with COVID, but I do not think that this strategy exacerbates that. All of the economic data points to increased business vibrancy when you make cities more attractive to people. So I just want to say thanks to the staff, and I'm supportive of the strategy.
Right, thanks.
I'd like to call a division.
Okay, divisions will be called. Councillor Neil Stevens.
Kia ora, thank you, Mr. Chair, and speaking in favour of this strategy. I first really want to acknowledge the hard work that Sue, Marg and Kylie from Stantec put into this. I went to some of the first engagement that we did on the strategy, and I think it reflected what we all know, is that parking is something that is and can get people quite passionate about. But what those engagements also showed was that there was not a universal desire or universal need for the same type of parkings. Immediately, contradictions between the needs of city centre residents, of those who like to visit our centres, those who work in our centres, our retailers, our hospitality businesses, contradictions between their competing needs were immediately brought to the forefront. And I think that's what really highlights why this strategy is so needed, because the status quo isn't working for people. And I think particularly we saw after the first COVID lockdown, where we basically went for a free-for-all model of parking, that the dangers and risks of improperly managed parking, where we had for the first time that I know of, business owners complaining about free parking and endless parking, because all of a sudden you had a city that was almost filled to the brim with cars because we did not have the management practices in place. Now, this is a strategy based in hard evidence, and you'll see similar policies reflected around New Zealand and around the globe in a whole lot of thriving cities, and actually acknowledging the role parking management plays in supporting our cities to thrive. I think particularly within a COVID environment, a need for a strong direction is needed more than ever. And if we were to throw this away now, all we're saying is that we don't have direction, that there is no journey to bring people on because we're not heading anywhere. Now, I really want to acknowledge that the work staff have done to take on board those concerns, to alter proposals, to commit to further conversations and engagement. But at the end of the day, this is a strategy that is best practice and that acknowledges the role that we all have to play to make our cities work and the competing interests at hand. And so to the people who are out there and concerned about what this could mean, just know that, one, we are listening, and you'll see that reflected in the recommendations, that we're taking more time and committing even further to that engagement, but also that this has the potential and indeed is crucial in unlocking our city's full potential, because we don't want to be essentially a suburban mall in the US. We want to be Nelson, a distinct, creative and enjoyable place to be. And it's through strategies like this, through the city centre spatial plan, through our active transport plan, that we're going to reach that goal.
Thanks, Councillor Neil-Stevens. Councillor Laurie, speaking for or against?
Kia ora, Councillor McGurk. I'm speaking for. Just to pick up on some of the things we've heard already in the debate, research internationally shows that cities do better in every way when they're made more people-centric. This has been the lesson that has been learned in cities, successful cities across the world. This strategy actually gives priority to people with access needs. People with access needs are not left behind in the strategy. There will be people who object to change in Nelson. There are always people who object to change. But there'll be just as many people who will look at this and say, actually, we're not changing fast enough. And I think we've seen evidence of this in our recent history when we went out with I think it was the Streets for People feedback. I guess it was 18 months, 2 years ago. Of the people who responded, we had about half say, don't do anything. And we had about half say, close Trafalgar Street to traffic entirely, all the way down to Halifax Street. So those are two very different, views of how we should approach things. So I think the strategy gets the balance about right, and that's a credit to everyone who's worked on it and everyone who's contributed to it. As I said the other day, talking about the future development strategy, nothing changes if nothing changes. And one of the things we've heard over and over again from our community is they want some change. We've heard this from retailers, we've heard this from residents, we've heard this from our groups. People do want to see some change. They want our city to work better. And here's the thing, the rest of the world is changing. I have to echo what Councillor Sampson said a short time ago. I don't want Nelson Whakatū, our smart little city, to get left behind. And I think not changing at all is not a smart little city thing to do. We don't have to look that far. I mean, you can look at places like New York, you can look at places like Paris, but you can actually just look across Cook Strait to the capital, Wellington. In Wellington, what they are proposing is quite full on compared to anything that is in the strategy. For people who don't know, Wellington is moving towards prioritising pedestrians and buses through the heart of the city. And now many of us will know Wellington, so I'm going to expand on this a little bit. We are talking about prioritising buses and pedestrians, people through Lambton Quay, Willis Street, Manor Street, and Courtney Place. That is a big change. We are not talking about really big change with this strategy. We're talking about a sensible way forward that gets, as I said, the balance about right. And if we choose not to change, the city will suffer, in my opinion. So those are my thoughts. Mr. McGurk, Brian McGurk, Mr. Councillor McGurk, thank you for listening. I really hope everyone thinks about this very, very carefully, because this is a very important decision for the city. Thank you.
Thanks, Councillor Laurie. Councillor Bowater, speaking for or against?
Thank you. I'm going to use a phrase I've used before. I reluctantly agree to this support. It's not without its flaws, and I totally acknowledge the amount of time that has been spent on it. For the fact that I remember one workshop, I said that a road is only the size it is, and the more you put on it, something's got to give. And I can see that this is trying to address that in some ways, and I see the word consultation peppered through it. I'm heartened that the structure plan 2004 is going to come back, so that there's actually going to be some discussion around that as well. And that indicates to me that the staff is listening when things like that are rebrought back and should have never gone away, perhaps. There's been some comments made around the CBD. Be aware that the CBD has expanded to include some businesses that were never in the CB to begin with. And I'll leave it at that. And I will say that some people could perceive that in some areas I have conflicts. I try to leave my personal situations and experiences outside the room. And I would appreciate if others would actually acknowledge that, because on occasions I have been disappointed and disillusioned and let down by the behaviour of others around this table and the way that I have been treated. So I will leave that there because it is not part of a debate, but I see it coming through time and time again. And I'm a very community-focused person, and I would like that to be forefront in people's minds. So I will, as I say, be reluctantly supporting this. I think that Tahuna has suffered greatly through some parts of plans that have happened. I acknowledge too that the city centre isn't quite where we think it is, and we need to, as I have said on occasion before, bring everyone along on the journey. I asked that when originally, straight after COVID, we experienced some backlash, and they hadn't been. So the fact that the word consultation has been used through this document, I want that to remain our focus when we are moving forward with everyone who is involved with this. We need to do the consultation. That needs to be forefront. As I said, I am heartened that there has been pieces put into this. So to me, it is more of a flexible consultation document than it was. And I would like that to remain the way it is, and also to coming through for the new council, that could be front in mind for them as it is for the staff. So as I say, I reluctantly support. And coming back to comments that have been made, COVID has, in a sense, changed the way we look at our travel. If you're in a car, you're in a bubble. If you're in a bus, you're not. So there are some preconceived ideas of vulnerability that perhaps need to be looked at and given a little bit more support around there. But I think that this is a passionate topic that we could all talk quite a great length of time about. But as I said, I will reluctantly support. Thank you.
Thanks. So Councillor Bowater, Councillor Fulton, speaking for or against?
Thank you. Through the chair, I am reluctantly supporting as well. I had considered voting against because for me this doesn't actually go far enough, and I've heard a lot of debate today about how we need to listen to our community, and absolutely we do, but we also have a climate crisis. And if you think about the COVID emergency response and the things we did as communities and as people to address that, we should all be working collectively to address the climate crisis in the same way. And I strongly believe that if we start to make these changes, then the community will get behind them when they really understand how important it is to reduce our greenhouse gas emissions now. We don't have any time left. It needs to be happening now. And I think that strategies like this does support that direction. I think we could have gone further. I think we could have been bolder in our desire to communicate that. I also think that we could be promoting ourselves as a smart city in a sense, in terms of supporting that ecotourism and being a low fossil fuel community in terms of so if we create a city which is more about people rather than about cars, then that becomes part of our branding. And I think that there was a real opportunity for us to be doing that more strongly through this strategy. I do understand why we've ended up with what is perhaps a compromise, because some people want the change and some people don't want the change. And I do also appreciate that a lot of people are car dependent because our bus networks aren't sufficient, and we are a pretty hilly city. So car dependency is a product of our society over decades, rather than a day-to-day choice for many people. People who are particularly busy, they rely on their cars for that convenience in terms of getting to work or getting children to school, that sort of thing. So for me, there's that balance between appreciating some people are just trying to get through the day and looking to the future when we know that we have to have a really strong response to changing the way we do things for the sake of our community and for the sake of planetary health. So I will support this, but I think it's important to remember our response is key in supporting that global change.
Thanks, Colin. Mr. Poro, speaking for or against?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Speaking for, I agree with a lot of the comments that have been made on both sides of the argument. One of the things that I'd encourage us to think about, particularly in the next 12 to 24 months, is the very real hardship that our communities are going to be going through in relation to cost of living and inflation, which is really, really smacking our face on our doorsteps at the moment. And we know that some of our community will be hit a lot harder, and in both our our everyday people as well as our retail businesses are likely to feel the very real impacts of that. And although parking is a very small piece of that equation, it is a piece of that equation. And just being sensitive and a bit innovative and entrepreneurial around the ways that we can maybe be flexible in the timing of our strategies and the initiatives that we're bringing forward to ensure that that change burden and the cost burden together are not one of those additional overwhelming factors that are impacting our people at a time that is difficult. So yeah, I just wanted to make sure that we were thinking about, we can be flexible in the way that we do this, accepting the strategy. We can be thoughtful in the way that we think about implementation and the timing of the different elements associated with that. So kia ora tātou.
Thank you for those comments. I think no one else will speak. I'll just exercise a quick right of reply before we put it up. Just remind that this strategy has had a long gestation period. It's been something that's probably began even the last term, but certainly has had a long period of discussion and engagement within the community, and is part of a wider suite of initiatives that have been initiated. So there's certainly generated a fair bit of interest, and I think people have had the opportunity to at all stages to put their views forward. And as was highlighted, this is a deeply sort of personal and it's a subject matter that people tend to have strong views on, would be a fair way of saying it. And some of those views do conflict and contrast. It's also important to remember this is part of a broad suite of initiatives that we've been working on throughout the training. We think of the regional public transport plan. We think of the regional land transport plan. Think of the active transport strategy coming on at Te Ara, Wakatu, to range a few. So you'll be aware of this is a part of a broad suite, and it should be seen as part of that broad suite of initiatives. We've had the benefit of looking at the officers and the consultants have been able to draw upon good practice from around the country and around the world, for that matter, to apply it to our particular situation. And that is the way So that's something else that should be taken into consideration. So I'll leave it at that. I will be supporting the recommendation in its entirety. A division has been called, so we'll put it to the vote. So I'll ask Mr. Levertis to record the votes.
Quick question, Mr. Chairperson, is this both the recommendation and the recommendation to council? Is it all
yes,
in one?
I'll do it as a whole, as both the receiving and it'll be a recommendation to council. So I'm not sure when it'll be coming to council. Probably.
Excuse me, through the chair, I asked for the receiving of the report to be taken in parts before I asked for the division.
Okay.
Right. Well, do you want to just receive the report?
Yeah.
Okay. Well, I'll put just the first part of the recommendation. I'll just bring up my. The one is that we receive the adoption of the report, adoption of the strategy and the management plans and the attachments. So that's the first part of the recommendation. So I'll just put that, those in favour of receiving the report, just tick or cross. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. It is carried by a majority. The next one is that we'll deal with approves the parking strategy and also the recommendation. So I'll do that as a whole. Our division has been called.
Through the chair, if everybody's ready. Councillor McGurk.
Aye.
Councillor Bowater.
Aye.
Councillor Brand.
No.
Councillor Courtney.
No.
Councillor Edgar's not here. Councillor Fulton.
Aye.
Councillor Laurie.
Aye.
Councillor Noonan.
Aye.
Councillor Neil Stevens.
Aye.
Councillor Rainey.
Aye.
Councillor Sanson.
Aye.
I'm unsure if Councillor Skinner is here. I can't see on my screen. I saw a note that he was leaving. Okay, sorry,
I'm
Councillor
here.
Skinner.
So for me, it's no.
Ms. Oporo.
Right.
Yeah, thanks to Mr. Vertis. The recommendation is carried 8 to 3. Thank you very much. If you want to take a break, before we do, we'll move into public excluded for the reasons, particular matter that it's to protect the privacy of natural persons and also to carry on negotiations.
Happy to move.
That. I'm happy to move that or second it.
Moved by Councillor Courtney, seconded by who was?
Oh, that was me.
Councillor Brand. I'll put it. Those in favour of moving into public excluded indicate with a green tick. It looks like it's been carried. Yeah, carried by carried. Okay, we're now in public excluded.
Through the chair, sorry, could you please also just confirm that you are in a place where you can't be overseen or overheard, and we will just remove the youth councillor as well before we go into confidential.
Yep, thank you. Yeah, thanks very much. Councillor Bowater.
We just need to stop the live stream through the chair, just if you could give us a second.
Sorry, it was just a wave goodbye to Stella because she was leaving the meeting, our youth councillor.